Welcome back to Let's Tab 59. I hope you're all well. So, straight into it. Soviet Union / Russian chemical targeted assassinations on UK soil. Big title. So, I want to talk about 3 chemical assassinations in UK mainland, and all 3 of them are quite well known. I'm sure many of you know about them, heard about them, but I found them quite interesting, and I want to chat about them. So the first one was an attack on a Bulgarian dissident, and it's believed that the attack was carried out by a Bulgarian KGB assassin in 1978 in London. Markov was a dissident. He'd got political asylum in UK, and he was working for the BBC in London, for the BBC Bulgarian service. So he was saying lots of stuff on the radio back in them days, which was upsetting the Soviet Union. So they decided he needed to go. How did they do it? Well, they got an umbrella, and it was called the umbrella poisonings, this one. They got an umbrella, excuse me, it was rigged up to inject a small metal ball with holes drilled in it. Now, this little ball was about the size of a pinhead. It was tiny. Little holes drilled into it, and inside was a substance called ricin, deadly. Also inside the little ball was some sugar, and the idea was that the sugar sealed the ricin in, and once the ball was injected into the body, the temperature of the body would melt the sugar and therefore release the ricin into the person's system. And that's what they did. So they rigged up this umbrella, and as Markov was leaving work, I believe, busy, bustling town, Waterloo Bridge, somebody bumped into him and he felt a sharp stab in his thigh, and he fell ill soon after. Yeah, in fact, it killed him 4 days. He was dead within 4 days. He'd defected back in 1969. This is now 1978. So it took for a while to get this together. But he only lasted 4 days, and he's dead. Interestingly, 10 days before the attack on Markov in London, there was a very similar attack. There's a very similar attack in Paris. Same detail. Got an umbrella with a ricin ball in it, bang. But that person survived. But it was probably the same person that carried out the London attack. But the person in Paris survived. So that was the first one. And obviously that was in Soviet Union days, 1978 Cold War days. Carried out by the Bulgarians. It's believed it's carried out by the Bulgarians. Never solved. No one's ever brought to justice for that. And the second one was after the Cold War days. So it was a Russian one. And that was in 2006. Again in London. This time, the guy that was targeted was it's Alexander Litvinenko. He was a former FSB officer over in UK. He was working with British intelligence, we believe. Anyway, how did they get him? Well, he had a meeting with 2 officers, FSB officers, it's believed, in a London hotel where they drank tea. And they laced his teacup with Polonium 210. Polonium 210 is a radioactive substance. It was traced, once they found out what it was, they managed to, the British services, intelligence services, managed to trace that source back to a nuclear plant in Russia. Litvinenko was adamant on his deathbed that he'd been targeted by Vlad. We don't know. Again, no one was ever brought to justice for this one. So they laced him with Polonium 210 in 2006. He lasted 3 weeks after being poisoned. Awful death. Horrible, long, prolonged death, 3 weeks. And then he died. Because it was a radioactive substance they used on him, so it wasn't a chemical attack, was it? It was a radiological attack. Because he was contaminated and died from polonium 210 poisoning, he was buried in a lead-lined coffin for obvious reasons. Now, the third one, more recently, 2018, known as the Salisbury poisonings. Now, this one was worse in one way, because although it was targeted on one specific guy, Sergei, his name was Sergei Skripal. He was the guy they wanted. He was a former Russian military officer. He defected to the West and was living in Salisbury with his daughter Yulia. Well, she come over. She wouldn't live there all the time, I think. She used to commute backwards and forwards. But she was with him when they got hit. So what was that one all about? Well, again, 2018, very prominent. They even made a BBC dramatisation of it. So there's plenty more detailed information. It's very interesting. If you don't know too much about this one, it's really worth looking at it. So this one was a nerve agent. They used Novichok. Absolutely deadly. This Novichok, once it's down, once you put it on the surface, it can stay there for 50 years, up to 50 years. You can contaminate that piece of. It's odourless, doesn't taste of anything. It's a innocuous looking innocuous looking substance. How did that happen? Well, two guys come over from Russia, it's believed, obviously two FSB officers or maybe GRU officers, came over, stayed in London in a hotel overnight with a couple of prostitutes and a bag of marijuana. So as soon as they got out of Russia, they're having a good time. They come down to Salisbury, done a recce, sort of under the guise of being tourists, looked around Salisbury Cathedral, etc. Went and done a recce on his house, and they got this Novichok. And what they did was they sprayed some of this substance on the door handle of his front door, on the outside of his front door. So they walked out the front door, obviously he was not about or whatever, and sprayed the handle of the door, and then done one. Disposed of the bottle and did one. So Sergei and his daughter Yulia come out of the house, obviously touching the door handle to close the door. They went into town, or into Salisbury City, had something to eat in a restaurant together, and wandered around the town and ended up sitting down on a park bench and became very, very ill quite quickly. Locals passing by noticed this couple, this father and his daughter there, obviously in distress, and called the services, etc. Ambulances come, blah, blah, blah. Off it all went. Well, once they Googled his name, once they identified Sergei and his daughter, and they Googled him, they found out who he was, that he was a defected KGB officer, or FSB officer. The wheels got into motion, and they realised then very quickly what might have happened. Some form of poisoning, but they didn't know what it was. Police arrived at Sergei's house. They did suit up, they did put gloves on, and a police sergeant, Nick Bailey, I believe his name was, he enters the house first. He goes in. So obviously he's touched the door handle, but he's gloved up. He goes into the house, going around switching lights on, so he's touching everything. Anyone that's had any sort of CBRN or NBC training will know, whatever you touch, you can have spread the contamination. He didn't know, obviously. So he's got it on his gloves. He's touching light switches, picking up things in the house, having a cursory search around, opening drawers, etc. to try and get clues about what's gone on. As this police sergeant, Nick Bailey, comes out of the house, he's got his face mask on, he's got his gloves on still. He's come out of the house, again, probably touched the door handle. And then he lifts his protective goggles up to itch his eye. Straight away transferring that deadly Novichok from his gloved hand around his eye. He starts to fall ill quite quickly. They get him checked out, and initially they don't find anything. But later on, he gets worse and worse. Sergei and his daughter Yulia are very sick as well. They're in intensive care. But they survive. They survive the attack. The police sergeant, Nick Bailey, he's getting worse and worse. But eventually, he survives. Now at this stage they know what it is. They know it's Novichok. The medical services, the CBRN from the Royal Tank Regiment in those days, they're on the scene. They're taking away front doors, they're taking away cars, decontaminating the house. The park bench that Sergei and his daughter Yulia were sat on in Salisbury City in the park, they cut that out of the ground, they take that away. All goes to Porton Down for analysis or whatever. So that's all kicking off. But the 3 people that have been contaminated, Sergei, his daughter Yulia, and Nick Bailey, the police officer, all survive. Everything gets decontaminated, panic over. However, a guy called Charlie Rowley, who lived in Amesbury with his girlfriend Dawn, he's out in Salisbury. He's having a bit of a scavenge in the bins. And he comes across in this dumpster bin, it's an alleyway, he comes across what he thinks is an expensive looking bottle of perfume in a sealed container. He thinks, I'll take that home for Dawn. It looked quite posh in its packaging. That's the Novichok. That's what the 2 assassins, if you like, used. It was in a woman's perfume bottle. Obviously, after they'd sprayed the door handle, before they did a runner, they ditched the Novichok in this perfume bottle in a bin, in a dumpster bin, down an alleyway. So Charlie comes across it, thinks he'll take it home for his girlfriend, which he does. So he goes back to Amesbury, back to where they live, and the next morning he gives it to her as a gift. She's like, questions where he got it from. He doesn't give any answers to it. She knows he's a bit dodgy. Hi there.
Hi, morning.
Morning. So he gives this gift, if you like, of this perfume bottle to her. She opens it up, sprays it on her wrist, as girls do. You spray it on your wrist, rubs her wrist together, rubs it on her neck, and takes a good sniff of it to see what it's like. That's Novichok. Obviously, it's odourless. She smells it, can't smell anything. Offers her wrist to Charlie. He takes a sniff of it. He can't smell anything either. So I think it's a bit of a waste of time. Think no more of it. Well then, Dawn, the girl that sprayed it onto her wrist, she falls ill within about 15 minutes. Now she had a history of drug abuse. So initially when she falls ill and they take her into hospital, that's what they're looking for. And then they very quickly realise, no, it's Novichok poisoning. Boyfriend Charlie, he falls ill too, but he's had a lot less dose than she has. They get him into hospital, and unfortunately Dawn passes away. It kills her. Charlie survives. Incredible. There's 3 targeted assassinations. Ricing, the first one. The second one, radioactive polonium 210. And the last one in 2018 with Novichok nerve agent poisoning in UK mainland. Now, I'm sure there's probably other instances like that of chemical attacks, assassinations, some we may not even know of. But those are the 3 main ones which I wanted to chat to you about. So if you're out and about and you find any perfume bottles, don't leave them alone. Don't touch anything. That's the answer to that one, isn't it? And beware of people with umbrellas in busy places. Shouldn't joke about it. But very interesting assassination attempts. And I'm sure that, like I say, there's been more. And I'm sure the British have done stuff, and I'm sure the Americans maybe have done stuff as well. A lot of stuff you don't hear about. So, that's that one. Now, it's coming to Christmas. Tomorrow is Christmas Eve. Going to do a Christmas one, I promise you. But until then, if you've, by the way, if you're watching this and you haven't subscribed to my channel, please consider it. I'm not saying do it, I'm saying consider it. But till the next time, stay safe everybody. Remember, have a good Christmas and let's tab.